Well, here the Prime Minister has repeated his refusal to reopen the Syria issue for another vote in Parliament. In subdued but tense exchanges with the Labour leader Ed Miliband, David Cameron said his only regret about last week's vote was that it was forced by Labour at all. Mr Miliband defended his decision to oppose UK military involvement in principle.
Does he accept that there remains support across the country for Britain taking every diplomatic, political and humanitarian effort to help the Syrian people? And last week's vote was not about Britain shirking its global responsibilities. It was about preventing a rush to war.
Last week, the House of Commons voted clearly, and I've said I respect the outcome out of that vote, and I won't be bringing back plans for British participation in military action. I agree with him we must use everything we have in our power, our diplomatic networks, our influence with other countries, our membership of all the key bodies, the G8, the G20, the UN, the EU, NATO, is use all that influence to bring to bear. My only regret of last week is I don't think it was necessary to divide the House on a vote that could have led to a vote, but he took the decision that it was.
Well, it was also revealed today that an ally of David Cameron, the MP Jesse Norman, has been sacked from the No. 10 Policy Board for not voting with the government last week on Syria. 30 Conservative MPs, 3 of whom are ministers, abstained or did not take part in the vote for other reasons. I'm joined now from Westminster by Ken Clarke, the government's Cabinet Office Minister without portfolio. Ken Clarke, for very reasonable domestic reasons, you did not vote, were given leave not to, and presumably you would have voted to support military action.
Yeah, I came back to take part in the excellent discussion we had at the National Security Council, where we reached the decision that we really did have to try to prevent the regime from being tempted to use chemical weapons to achieve success in the civil war. Unfortunately, my ailing wife and my 8-year-old grandchild were on a hillside in Italy. I couldn't abandon them for 2 days, and as we thought the Labour Party was likely to support us, it seemed probable at the time. I was paired by the Chief Whip with some Labour MP with similar difficulties and went back and wasn't able to get back to the vote when we discovered that Ed Miliband, to our amazement, was after all going to vote against us and get the Labour Party to do so.
But as the prophet might have said, this is democracy, baby. I mean, Jesse Norman voted on a matter of conscience, one of 30 MPs who did the same in your own party, gets sacked. What does that say?
Well, if I disagreed with the Prime Minister and actually not agreed with the National Security Council decision after the discussion in which I took part, I would have resigned. We have to have, in order to have a government, particularly on issues of war and peace, you have to make your mind up, and you do have to have collective responsibility. And actually, it is quite courageous to stand out, and you just have to accept that. Do not stay on board if you feel very strongly that you don't agree.
But there
fortunately,
were a lot of factors
I rebelled over Iraq. I wasn't on the front bench at the time, I will admit, but I've spoke against my party's front bench. I voted against my party's front bench. I supported Robin Cook. I'm not in favour of just intervening in. That was a terrible foreign policy mistake. This was quite different. I agreed with it, and I supported it, and we were so reasonably relaxed about Ed Miliband eventually reaching agreement. We were trying to get all-party agreement, and it was too late to get me back when he changed his mind.
Ken Clarke, there were a lot of factors in play. There was conscience, there was the Labour Party, as you don't want to blame, but there was also a shambles, and the shambles surely has to be laid at the feet of the Prime Minister. I mean, the New York Times is today reporting that the White House is saying perfectly clearly behind closed doors that Mr Cameron simply mishandled this affair.
Well, that's nonsense. I mean, people are trying to thrash about to move the story on it. It was a genuinely, extraordinarily important political dilemma. It was a political problem getting a parliamentary majority.
But Mrs Thatcher had a political problem getting the Commons together, and she did it.
But she got a majority. We did not get a majority because of the trauma of the Iraq War. The Americans wanted us to make this vote very quickly. We actually said we could have another vote later, before actual action if people wanted, but people were so scarred, I think, by the experience of the Iraq. We did not manage to get across to enough of our people that we were not repeating the gross error of Iraq, and then Miliband pulled most of the Labour Party out. And
for you, those were the factors, and the Prime Minister's leadership was exemplary.
The Prime Minister's leadership, the Prime Minister was sincere, he was clear. We had decided we were going to have...
But he was unsuccessful.
Well, that's democracy. I personally believe the vote was extremely unfortunate. I think it's extremely regrettable that we are in this position on chemical weapons. I think what we were doing, a targeted response to actually stop the regime being tempted to use chemical weapons again and to reduce their capacity to do so, and then out, was fine.
But this is your difficulty, isn't it?
We did not have time to get an adequate majority.
When you go around your constituency of Rushworth, do you really find people coming up to you and saying, you know, we wish you would go in and take military action again? In truth, they don't, do they? They come up to you and they talk about Iraq and they wonder what we did there. Did we drop some white phosphorus? Did we kill a few people rather more than we needed to?
Look, the idea that chemical weapons are no different from any other weapons, I would argue with on some other occasion, John. I think that for 100 years, people have tried to stop sarin gas and similar agencies being used as a weapon of war by dictatorships. And it's no good to say, oh, well, it's the same as any other warfare. That is not a view that I take. I don't think my constituents take it. I think my constituents were alarmed by talk of going into Iraq. I think what we propose is good. I hope the Americans are able to make sure that this regime is not tempted to make use
Ken
of
Clarke,
chemical
on that note, we
weapons.
have to leave it, unfortunately, but thank you very, very much for coming in. Thank you.